Our newsmaker this hour, Dr. Marty Makary, the FDA commissioner, marking his first 100 days on the job. It's been a busy few months with many changes at the agency, from vaccines to staffing. Good morning, doctor.
Good morning, Joe.
Maybe you've been on a few times. I don't remember, but we all went through that period together, obviously, and there's a lot of a look back now at that period. And I was, it's a hot button issue, and sometimes it's tough to talk about. And there's conspiracies and controversies. I think of Novak Djokovic. Right now, he's going to be in the finals, I think, at Wimbledon. And at the time, I wondered about his decision, the decision of tennis. What do we know now, doctor, in your view, about what we should have done with COVID? Should healthy people have been not forced, but strongly coerced to take that? At the time, I thought it was a game changer and a lifesaver.
Well, look, Joe, I had said during the time of the pandemic that if we have vaccine mandates for young, healthy individuals, we were going to see a rise of an anti-vaccine sentiment, and I think that's exactly what happened. We saw a tremendous loss in public trust. A study in JAMA found that 71% of people trusted their doctors and hospitals before the COVID pandemic, and that's down to 40%. That's a 31-point drop. And I think it was from ignoring natural immunity. I think it was from vaccine mandates insisting that soldiers and firefighters and teachers be fired if they don't have the vaccine, even if they were young and healthy and had the infection already. They had circulating antibodies that could neutralize the virus, but they were antibodies the government did not recognize because it failed to recognize natural immunity. So we lost a lot of ground in public trust, and we're trying to rebuild that now through radical transparency and being very honest and telling people the government is not your doctor. Talk to your doctor and get good advice from your doctor's wisdom and judgment.
There are some changes at the Vaccine Advisory Committee that a lot of hand-wringing and consternation about the new members. Is it anti-vax, doctor, would you say? Or how would you describe your approach to preemptive disease management?
Well, look, I think over at CDC, a different agency, they do have a reconstituted ACIP committee with a diversity of views among people who do believe that vaccines save lives. The past committee had pushed for COVID boosters in young, healthy people. And of course, that is probably why we see such a backlash today. There was never great evidence for repeat boosters in young, healthy children. As a matter of fact, there was a myocarditis risk that was largely downplayed in young males. And I think if you look at the track record of that committee, there's a reason why 85% of healthcare workers did not get a COVID booster last fall. So we are taking an evidence-based approach. Dr. Vinay Prasad and I outlined it in the New England Journal of Medicine, and we're basically saying that there's got to be a risk-stratified approach. That is high risk versus low risk. Does a healthy 12-year-old girl today need another 60 doses in her average lifespan? That is a scientific unknown, and we'd like to see a clinical trial before approving the vaccine for that reason.
How does removing the recommendation, though, increase choice, increase the patient's ability to come to a decision with doctors, since so many insurance plans and programs depend on ACIP and CDC recommendations in order to provide the no-cost, low-cost vaccines? Isn't this removing choice effectively from patients?
Now, the promise of the Secretary Kennedy is to let people know that vaccines will be available if people want them. You will be able to get a vaccine if you want them. So that's a decision between you and your doctor, and each individual insurance company has their own policy. Look, some insurance companies don't pay for important cancer treatments that for patients that I saw as a cancer surgeon. And so that is another entire issue that's unrelated to the FDA.
Okay, so the fact that private insurers, employer-sponsored insurance plans, Medicare Part D, Medicaid, the Vaccines for Children program, all of them link providing no-cost vaccines to CDC and ACIP recommendations. That removing the recommendations doesn't remove in some way the choice that patients can make, especially the vulnerable patients who may not be able to afford to pay.
That's right. It does not remove the choice. And our job at the FDA is, and this is a charge by Congress, is to look at applications that are submitted to us and determine what is safe and effective. And so that is what we are committed to. I think there was some lost trust in the FDA when there was a new policy that basically said for a young, healthy 15-year-old boy, we were going to rubber stamp a COVID vaccine without a clinical trial every year in perpetuity, and the kid must get it. And I think we're saying we're going to be less absolutist when there's no evidence. I think the most dangerous thing you can do in public health is to demand something of a young, healthy individual when the evidence is just not that supportive for a new virus that creates a new protein and a new vaccine that creates a new protein where we haven't had a clinical trial in over 4 years. And those results in children were mixed back 4 years ago.
And the basic tenets of MAH, of MAHA, or Make America Healthy Again, it seems to me it's proactive health care versus reactive. You'd have to do that with children, I think, and I immediately think about, as a country, our levels of obesity are just much higher than they need to be or should be. What does tackling that entail, and how does it play into these new drugs, and whether you really start, I don't know, is that what we need to do to all our kids with Wegovy or Ozempic or something, doctor? Or what's the answer? Is it foods? Is it additives? Is it, the secretary has a lot of ideas.
Yeah, it's all of the above, Joe, and we've not been talking about root causes in healthcare. I've been in academic medicine and been at all the major institutions giving grand rounds. We don't talk about root causes. We don't ask, why do 40% of our nation's children now have a chronic disease? Why do a third of our nation's children now have prediabetes or diabetes? We've got to talk about school lunch programs, not just putting every 6-year-old on Ozempic. We've got to talk about environmental exposures and chemicals in the food, not just chemotherapy. If you look at the types of cancer that are going up in young people, they are the GI cancers. That is the organ that interfaces with what we eat. So we've got to look at all the chemicals. We are doing an inventory of the 1,000+ chemicals banned in Europe that appear in the U.S. food supply. You saw our action to remove all 9 petroleum-based food dyes from the U.S. food supply by next year. We're getting tremendous participation by the food manufacturers. We are looking into baby formula innovation. That recipe the FDA issues hasn't been updated essentially in 30 years. We need more innovation. Moms want baby formula without added sugar, without corn syrup, without seed oils. We need more innovation. It's been a regulatory failure. And we're asking the big question, why does it take 10 years for a drug to come to market? I mean, that is a giant existential question, and we're going to have to challenge deeply held assumptions to answer it. So we announced our program to reduce animal testing and replace it with computational modeling and organ-on-a-chip technology, whereby drugs can be tested on cell culture medium in a lab with cells from the liver or heart or other organoids. We have a priority pathway now to pilot. Can we get a decision out in weeks instead of a year once that final application is approved? Can we run more continuous trials? And can we use AI more in the review process? We now have AI agency-wide for our reviewers. And yesterday we announced we're going to make our decision letters, including rejection letters for drug, public information so companies don't spin the results and developers can see exactly how the FDA thinks. And that's part of our radical transparency agenda.
I wanted to talk to you, Dr. Makary, about the national priority vouchers, which does aim to speed up the approval process after a final drug application is submitted, to get it down to 1 to 2 months as opposed to 10 to 12 months for national priorities. What qualifies as a national priority? I mean, you know, let's say there's an obesity drug that's even better than the ones out on the market. Is that a national priority for the FDA to consider an expedited process? What falls into the category?
Great question, Melissa. So it's a large unmet public health need. It is a priority identified as part of a U.S. domestic national priority, like the domestication of manufacturing as a national security issue. And look, the president is very adamant that he would like to see lower drug prices for Americans, and he doesn't like it that Americans are getting ripped off with drugs that are 2, 5, 10 times higher in the United States than in London or France or Germany, other OECD countries. So we are including the affordability of drugs as a national priority. So we have a committee that's set up that will determine which products and companies will get these vouchers as a part of a pilot. Look, we got to try new things. We've got to ask ourselves, why does it take so long for a cure to come to market? And we want to see more cures and meaningful treatments for Americans. We want to see big data used so we can have eyes on a drug immediately after approval and not just wake up 5 years later and say, hey, Vioxx may have killed 38,000 people. Maybe we need to take action. Or opioids may have killed nearly 1 million Americans 19 years after the approval of OxyContin. We're going to be having an incredible post-market surveillance program where we monitor drugs immediately after approval using big data and the cloud. And if we do it well, it can actually change the threshold for approval, especially when it comes to rare diseases.
Can you give us an example of a health crisis right now, just so we have an idea of what sorts of drugs, what sorts of companies may be seeking to use this national priority voucher program?
You know, one of the cool things, Melissa, in this job is you get to see potentially promising treatments that are in the pipeline. And I'd like to see a cure for type 1 diabetes. I'd like to see more cancer therapies that apply to stage 4 metastatic disease and cancer therapies that result in what we call in medicine a complete pathologic response. That is, the cancer melts away. There already appears to be some therapies that may enable cancers to shrink and go away completely, that is, be eliminated without chemo, surgery, or radiation therapy. I'd like to see a universal flu shot so we don't have to try to guess each year which strain is coming. There are candidates out there. And I'd like to see treatments for neurodegenerative diseases and other disabling diseases. I had an aunt who died of Alzheimer's disease. I'd like to see more in the neurodegenerative space.
A lot of angst and panic about layoffs at the FDA. I don't. Can you? Was it bloated? Did it need restructuring? Is 15% a big number in terms of layoffs, Doctor? Because there are some people that say it's going to safeguarding the drugs that come into this country, manufactured elsewhere, are at risk now. There's not enough people to monitor. What do you make of that criticism?
That's not true. So there were no layoffs to scientific reviewers or inspectors or our law enforcement division at the FDA. We do inspections around the world, and we're leveling the playing field on that front. But there were early retirements, and so we're actively hiring scientific reviewers. Normally, there's a vacancy rate because there's a turnover in scientific reviewers, but no scientific reviewers were laid off. There were tremendous redundancies in the empire-building culture, the fiefdoms of the centers at the FDA, and they became their own, independent organizations, and they had very little accountability. They had their own revenue stream from user fees, and they had redundant services as a result. That is, we had 12 different travel offices. We had nearly 2,000 HR people and budget and procurement staff, and a lot of it was just because of the center fiefdom culture. So we've consolidated that now to say if we're going to launch AI for the FDA reviewers, as we recently did, we're going to do it agency-wide. It's not going to be each center independently with their own IT teams coming up with a product. Just look at our adverse event reporting systems. They are so clunky, Joe. We have one for vaccines called VAERS, one for devices called MAUDE. We have VAERS and CARES and FAIRS and Sentinel. We have 10 different adverse event reporting systems, all sort of independently developed. We're going to go to one, and so that way we can have a great user interface and a great database of adverse events that we can use for our post-market surveillance of drugs.
Doctor, I also wanted to ask you about your quest to make the FDA more transparent, and part of that was yesterday releasing more than 200 rejection letters, as you had mentioned before, to the public, so the public can actually see why a drug was rejected, as opposed to getting a press release from the company, which may or may not give the full details or may have spin involved, et cetera. The letters were from 2020 to 2024, and investors at least are wondering if it's going to be more real time, because that's the only way it's really going to be useful.
Yeah, let me be clear, Melissa. It's going to be real time. That was just the initial batch because we need time to do the human redaction of those letters. So I know some media outlets were, hours after our announcement saying, oh, some of the, this is only part of the stack of all the letters. We have thousands of letters that we are redacting. We're going to make them public. Drug developers and inventors are going to be able to go through them and see not just how the FDA thinks, but how one study section of the FDA thinks, the study section of interest. And we're going to be releasing them in real time as we make decisions. And that way, shareholders will be able to see exactly what the FDA said. Look, markets like predictability. And I've been doing a CEO listening tour. We're about 2/3 the way through. It's in 7 cities. And when we meet with pharmaceutical CEOs in private, that is where they can be open and honest about their ideas for reforming the FDA without their shareholders listening, they tell us they want more predictability. They want to know exactly how the FDA thinks, and they want better communication so they can, one CEO said, if we could just have a couple 15-minute calls with the FDA review team along the process, it could save us nearly a year of doing things just out of guesswork and trying to figure out what the FDA wants. So we're going to be radically transparent.
When can you come back?
I love your show. I'd like to see fewer direct-to-consumer drug ads on your show, but I love your show.
I was just going to ask you about
and
that.
I'll come back.
I was going to say I want to talk to you about that because I still want this purple pill that's on nightly news every night. I don't know what it does. I have no idea, but they make me want it so much. I've been bugging my doctor, give me that purple pill. It's crazy, doctor. Why do we need, if you need something, does the doctor need to be sold on something on TV for him to prescribe or her to prescribe the right thing for you? What's the whole rationale behind all these things? All I know about are side effects I never want to get all over my body. That's all I know from these things. And I see people, overweight people marching along the street. Where are they going? What are all these things, and why do we need them?
Yeah, they're always singing and dancing. They're always singing and dancing. And we have a regulation at the FDA. And I know sometimes you're at home totally healthy. You just get back from the gym and you're watching these ads nonstop and you want to say, OK, I give up. I'll take it. I don't know what it is.
I don't know what it is. But I don't want it.
Look, there's a regulation that says there should not be a misleading impression from these ads. And so we're taking a hard look at that.